Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's message. I'm Eric, the lead pastor of South Mountain Community Church. Thank you for taking just a bit of your time to be with us today. We exist for one reason, and that's to help as many people as possible take their next step towards becoming fully devoted and fully delighted followers of Jesus Christ. And I know that for so many people, church and even religion can be messy and oh so complicated, but it doesn't have to be that way. Here you can belong before you believe. So our hope is that your first visit with us is enjoyable, meaningful, and unlike the church experiences of your past. We also think that the best way to experience delight is with others in person. So SMCC is about more than just a Sunday sermon. We have 5 locations for you to choose from where you can connect with people in authentic community. We want every message you hear to engage your head, your heart, and your hands for a life of full delight. So with all of that in mind, enjoy today's message. We are past the halfway point in a series that we're calling Trust Issues. We all have trust issues to some degree, so this series is for all of us. And what we've been saying, if you haven't been here with us, is that trust is not like a light switch. Trust is not like a light switch that's just either all on or all off. This is not how trust is. This is not how trust goes. In fact, if you think of trust like this in your relationships with others or with God, it'll make those relationships confusing, maybe unhealthy, and perhaps give you no hope when trust is shattered. When it comes to trust with God, I once heard somebody say, "Come on, Eric, just trust him already." And I was like, how do I go from no trust to full trust overnight? We can't. This is not what trust is like. But what we've said is that trust is a bit more like a dimmer switch. And I want to just illustrate this. If you've been through a scenario in your life where you've been hurt or trust has been broken, you've been betrayed, it might feel like the lights on trust are just slowly going out. Wow. And when you begin to learn what trust is actually like, the good news is, the hope is that trust can get brighter. The lights of trust can go back on. Why don't you give it up for the guys in the booth? If you're looking for a team to join, it really is just this easy, okay? You can, at least I think it's that easy. I've actually never done it, but I'm assuming it's that easy. And that's the good news. I hope that for all of us, trust is getting just a little bit brighter. Now today we are in the 4th part of the series. If you missed the first 3, let me get you caught up. We realized that trust isn't just all on or all off. There's actually 5 aspects that make up trust. And when we assess those 5 things objectively, we can look at some criteria to see if someone's worth trusting. The first thing we talked about was understanding. Do they understand me? Do they get me? And then we talked about intent or motive. Are they for me? Do they want what's best for me? And then we looked at this capability or ability. Do they have the ability to deliver with a specific need in a specific situation? Those are the 3 aspects of trust we've covered. Today we're into the 4th aspect of trust. I want to lead you there with a question. Have you ever been in a situation with somebody where things started to go wrong and they started to respond and react, and you thought to yourself, well, where did that come from? Have you ever thought that before? You're in a moment and someone kind of flies off the handle and you think to yourself, where did that come from? These are the moments where people kind of snap. You can see these things happen at the DMV, okay? You can watch people snap there. Where did that come from? I've seen it at the airport, okay? Where did that come from? I've seen it on the golf course. Wow, that's a great place to witness someone snap. And you think, where did that come from? It can happen in the boardroom or the conference room at work. A few months back, I was coaching my hockey team, and it was a close game, and something began to happen in the stands, and the sweetest mom on the team, the softest, most compassionate, most encouraging, sweet mother on the team is exchanging F-bombs with another parent on the other team. And the ref comes over and ejects them. We got home, and my wife, Carissa, was like, I'm so sorry that happened. Just kidding. Oh, yeah, no, it wasn't Carissa. It wasn't Carissa. But we think to ourselves in those moments, where did that come from? And then if that is us, and we have to own up to it, or if we're describing the situation, then we say something like this. Well, that was so out of character for them. Where did that come from? Well, that was so out of character. And character is the 4th aspect of trust that we are going to talk about today. Trust, a definition of trust that we're working with today would be this. Trust is putting yourself at risk or in harm's way with another person because you know that they are so good, they have such high character that you're safe inside of that risk. You're gonna risk it with them because they won't violate you. They are a safe person, they are a good person with you. And so when it comes to character, what we are wondering in a person's life is this. When the stakes are high, and when it's a high stress environment, will they stay in character as a person of character? When things get intense and when things are heated, can I count on you to stay in character as a person of character? Or will you do something that seems out of character, that has everybody else going, where did that come from? This is what we're talking about today. Now, when we say character, it's really easy to think this, someone who doesn't lie, cheat, or steal. And that is a part of character, lie, cheat, or steal. But that's like the bare minimum. I mean, you can't have a trusted relationship with someone who lies to you, cheats you, or steals from you. But when we're talking about character, we're talking about more. See, character is not just the capacity for some morality. Character is the capacity to face reality head on. The intense, stressful, difficult moments of life, the person of character walks into them and walks through them and stays in character. So character really is, and you could write this down if you're taking notes, character is the collection of qualities that make up one's capacity to navigate conflict, process grief, carry stress, manage pressure, address fear, accomplish goals, feel emotion, and relate to people. When we're talking about character, we're talking about those collections of qualities that allow someone to face reality. This is sometimes called EQ, or emotional intelligence. See, we all know people who are incredibly bright. They have a high IQ, but low EQ. They're not the type of person you want to be around. Incredibly successful, high achievers, high performers, but we don't want to be around them because there's something about their character that would cause us to not feel all that connected to them, would cause us to not feel safe when we are with them. So as we think about this collection of qualities, I want to read to you something that has stood the test of time. For some 2,000 years, there's been a statement of these types of qualities that has aligned with all the most recent research in this category. What I'm going to read to you aligns with what the psychological research is saying about high EQ people of maturity and character. It aligns with staffing models and business leadership coaching. I mean, it aligns with all that we're seeing in the world today. It was written some 2,000 years ago. It's from the Bible. Let me read this collection of character qualities to you. For this very reason, we'll circle back to the reason at the end of today. For this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness. Every effort. See, grace is opposed to earning, but it is not opposed to effort. When we take next steps, we put forth effort to glorify and serve King Jesus. Peter is talking about that. Make every effort to add to your faith, and he gives this list of incredible qualities that aligns with everything I see in Forbes magazine, and when it comes to good leadership, good business strategy, good counseling practices, this is what we see. Add to your faith goodness, to goodness knowledge, to knowledge self-control, to self-control perseverance, to perseverance godliness, to godliness mutual affection, and to mutual affection love. For if you possess these qualities in increasing measure, meaning they can grow, in increasing measure, they will keep you from being ineffective and unproductive in your knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. I don't know about you. I want to be productive. I would like to be effective, not the opposite. Peter's encouraging that. Then he says this, but whoever does not have them is nearsighted and blind. They are unable to see something incredibly important that is right in front of them. What is it, Peter? He would say it's the gospel. They are nearsighted and blind, forgetting that they have been cleansed from their past sins. Forgetting what Jesus has done creates in them an inability to see who they can be in him. Now, the person who wrote this was Peter. And if you're the type of person who's like, yeah, that's the Bible, and of course it says nice things about how nice people should live, let's back up from that for a moment. This was Peter. And Peter didn't wake up one day understanding these qualities. He didn't wake up one day and just embrace them and have them. If you know anything about Peter's story, you know it was just the opposite. He needed to grow in self-control. He needed to grow in goodness and perseverance. He needed to grow in knowledge. One day, in a moment of confidence, but probably bravado and arrogance, Peter said something to Jesus that I think he would later regret. Look at what Peter said. Matthew records it. Peter declared, "Even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you, Jesus." Another way to say it, Jesus, I will never flip the switch on trust with you. And then a few moments go by, a bit of time goes by, and Jesus is arrested. And while he is in shackles, a young woman asks Peter about her allegiance to Jesus, and Luke records Peter's response. He denied it. "Woman, I don't know him," he said. So after the bold claim in Matthew and the reality of what happened in Luke, we just have to ask the question to Peter, Peter, where did that come from? Which one was so out of character? Peter, how did you get here, man? Well, he got there the way that we get there. There were parts of his life that remain untouched by Jesus. Parts of his life that weren't fully integrated into who Jesus was. And that sounds familiar because there are parts of my life that if I'm honest, I probably haven't let Jesus into yet, or at least not much. I have a next step to take. So I can relate with Peter. So when Peter writes this about these collection of characteristics that really model a person of high character, he's not writing from the moral high ground. He's not saying, come on, everybody, get with it and be like me. After all, I'm the Apostle Peter. He's writing from a place of deep transformation by the character and person of Jesus. I will show you that in just a little bit. But I want you to know this is Peter, not writing from the moral high ground, but humbly writing, probably with his knees on the ground, as he looks at his own life and talks to people about what it will look like to follow Jesus in their day and age, but by implication, our day and age as well. So he goes back to a few of these qualities. He picks up the quality of goodness. He talks about goodness. Goodness really is someone who has integrity. They're the same in public and private. They're a good person, as Jesus would define it. He talks about knowledge. This is a person who can take big truth and apply it into the small places of their lives. Take wisdom and apply it in everyday life. They have some street smarts. That's what's meant by knowledge. They have self-control. They're not impulsive. They're disciplined, they're diligent, they're patient. That's what Peter means by self-control. He talks about perseverance, someone who can stick to a plan throughout the obstacles that they might face in this life. He talks about godliness, really the fruits of the Spirit that would show up in someone's life. He talks about mutual affection. This is someone who is a great friend, someone who can live in community with another and relax and laugh and enjoy and connect with someone with mutual affection. And of course, Peter talks about love. This idea that I'm gonna serve your best interest even if it costs me something, even at an expense to me, I'll pay because I am for you, I love you. And so Peter kind of lists out this incredible list of qualities that a person of high character has. Now, when it comes to trusting someone who doesn't have those qualities, the Bible gives us a pretty fascinating picture of all of this. I wanted to share it with you and see if it connects. In the book of Proverbs, there's a piece of wisdom about what it's like to trust somebody who doesn't have these character traits. It says this, like a broken tooth or a lame foot is reliance on the unfaithful in a time of trouble. When you trust somebody who doesn't have the character to be trusted in a season of life where there is trouble, in a high stress arena in life, it is like having a broken tooth, a lame foot. It is painful. The proverb goes on, like one who takes away a garment on a cold day, that's no fun. Like one who like vinegar poured on a wound, ouch, is one who sings songs to a heavy heart. Proverbs is describing a person who can't meet the demands of reality by entering into the pain of another. And their inability to do that will produce pain and hurt inside of the relationship. We trusted them to provide in a certain moment, and unfortunately, they just could not provide. They are out of touch with reality. It can be painful. So I thought I'd pause And illustrate this just a little bit. I recently came across a book called The Checklist Manifesto. The Checklist Manifesto. Checklist people in the room, you're gonna love this moment, okay? Checklist Manifesto is written by a surgeon named Atul Gawande. And he did some research that was so fascinating. What he did is he created a list of emergency room practices, and he put them into a checklist format, and he gave it to 8 hospitals who implemented it. And in the 8 hospitals that implemented his checklist, there was a 30% decrease in complications and a 50% decrease in deaths. It's incredible, all because of a simple checklist. And of course, he goes through the book and he poses the question, so why isn't every hospital doing this? Why isn't every emergency room doing this? People, that's why. Surgeons who see themselves, and he is one, surgeons who see themselves as above a checklist, too advanced for a checklist, not humble enough to submit to something as simple as a checklist. All the skill in the world to perform the most complicated surgeries in the world, but not enough character to humbly submit to a checklist. Should they be trusted? Perhaps they should grow in character first. It was a fascinating study. Now, this isn't just something that shows up in the medical world. You know where else you see people with a lot of influence and platform and power and position with low character? Religious leaders, pastors. Many years ago, there was an Instagram page that still exists called Preachers in Sneakers. Hand up if you've ever seen Preachers in Sneakers. Yeah, if you're like, Eric, what's Preachers in Sneakers? More of you need to hear about this, obviously. This is what Preachers in Sneakers is all about. It shows people who are very gifted on the stage, very talented, who have a ton of influence, but seem to like to spend a ton of money on their kicks, on their shoes. Look at these pair of loafers, $1,100. He's got a rabbit foot connected to some slippers, I think Ben Roby would look pretty good in a pair of those. No, it's a simple thing, but it's kind of not. I mean, there are people who have so much capacity, so much talent, the ability to understand a room and communicate in a way that draws a crowd. But unfortunately, there are parts of their lives that Jesus hasn't impacted yet. They haven't let him in yet. And it's low character. They have these parts of their lives, and Preachers in Sneakers, well, it is calling that out. Parts of their lives that might need a little bit of attention, a little bit of focus. Because perhaps that's a leader who can't be trusted in the biggest areas of life. I got my shoes from the Adidas store, okay? 50% off. It was a good deal, all right? I don't want to be up on Preachers and Sneakers anytime soon. This is interesting. So Peter, he gives us a collection of qualities, but quickly I wanted to list the opposite of some of those. We looked at trust contributors. Peter's talking about characteristics that would be trust contributors in a relationship, but let's look at trust minimizers. I wrote down just a few. Defensiveness, explosive anger, narcissism, emotional instability, controlling behavior, neediness, codependency, and gossip are really trust minimizing qualities. These can all be behaviors that when they show up in life, we think to ourselves, where did that come from? That came out of nowhere. That seems so out of character. Now, at this point, it might be easy to think, Eric, well then who can I trust? I don't even know if I'm trustworthy. I mean, I wrote that list in like 5 seconds because that's my list of my things that I'm working through, And so those things, they show up in our lives from time to time, or at least they show up in the lives of people we want to trust. So is there any hope for any of us? Well, there is. Let's go back to Peter for a moment. So Peter denies Jesus. He does it multiple times. It's a threefold denial if we look at it in the text. But on the other side of the crucifixion and the other side of the resurrection, Jesus shows up in Peter's life and engages with him in a way that would begin the restoration process for Peter. Remember, he didn't write his letter from the moral high ground. He wrote as a person transformed by the character of Jesus. And where did that transformation happen? Well, I think it happened in the way that Jesus re-engaged with him after his failure. In John 21, it's recorded like this, just a small bit of the conversation. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Do you love me more than these?" Now remember, we talked about this in week 1. A question from an omniscient being isn't designed for information because that person has it already. But a question from an omniscient being is designed for connection. And Jesus, by asking this question, is highlighting for Peter his desire for deep connection. So Peter, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said. The conversation's more robust than this, but this is at the heart of it. Yes, Lord, he said. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my lambs, which is exactly what Peter would go on to do when he preached to thousands on the day of Pentecost, massive crowds. He would go on to pastor thousands more. His pastoral influence would shape people in the first century. We just read it today. It is shaping people in this century. Peter would go on to be restored. His character would grow. He would eventually die. History says upside down for his commitment to Jesus. He failed that first time in his allegiance to Jesus, but by the end, he went to his death, confessing Jesus as his Lord. There's hope for Peter, and there's hope for us as well. That when we experience the character of Jesus, the forgiveness of Jesus, it would change us from the inside out and change our character as well. So perhaps throughout this series, this has been a very real series for you, and you've had a burning question. I've talked to people in every lobby after every one of these messages who are saying this: what would you say to me because my marriage has no trust? What would you say to me because my family is, man, we are divided? Eric, how do we walk through this? Perhaps you've had the question, is it possible to trust again? Is it possible to trust again? And if so, how? And so from now to the end of the message, I want to take us into a bit of a workshop on how to trust again. See, for many of us, it just feels like there's only two options. There's only two options is what it seems like, and both are unfavorable options. On the other side of betrayal, it's like, do I walk away from them forever, always? And walk away from all that we built and all that we had together? Do I have to say goodbye to all of that and lose all of that, never to experience it again? Or if I stay with them and continue to be in relationship with them, am I just submitting myself to being hurt over and over and over again by them? I don't like either one of those options. Thankfully, there's a third option. We can look at a relationship. We can look at a person's life. And with objective criteria, we can assess trustworthiness. And we can move forward in rebuilding trust. I want to take us into that now because there's a lot at stake with this stuff. So here we go, a 6-step model for trusting again. These come right out of Henry Cloud's book, Trust. If you haven't picked it up yet, I'd encourage you to do that. The 6-step model for trusting again. Here we go. First, we heal from what happened. Second, we move beyond anger or revenge to forgiveness, and we'll slow down and break these down one by one. Third, we ponder what we really want. Fourth, figure out if reconciliation is available. Fifth, assess trustworthiness. And sixth, we look for evidence of real change. Steps 1 through 4 are really about us preparing us for the trust building process. That takes a lot of preparation. And then the next steps 5 through 6, are all about rebuilding. So let's go slow and break this down. I can tell by the silence in the room, like this is real. What do we do first? Well, we have to heal. And here's what I mean. When the betrayal is fresh, the dagger is still sticking out of your back, it is not the best time to try and re-engage the relationship and rebuild trust. When our emotions are pinged, when our emotions have been hijacked by the pain, it is not time to go out and do something rash to fix it all and make it go away. The first thing we need to do is to heal. Because when our emotions are hijacked, we retaliate, we isolate, maybe we attack, maybe we make drastic, rash decisions in a moment of crisis when we shouldn't. So we have to heal. And what that means is we have to sort of bleed out the emotion for just a little bit. Let it hurt, feel the pain. But bandage the wound and bring that pain to another person that you trust in community. Bring that pain to God and spend some time doing some healing. Whew, that is so important. The wounds may be scabbed over, or maybe it's bandaged up. And then we can maybe move into the second step in the process. After we're healed up enough where when we think about the wound, our emotions don't hijack our lives, we can move into the second step of the process. And the second step was forgiveness. See, trust is about the future in the relationship, but forgiveness is about the past in the relationship. And forgiveness is so difficult. The second I bring that up, I'm sure you're bringing up reasons to not forgive already. Maybe you're even pushing back and fighting with me in this. You're like, we could probably skip that step in the process. We can't. There's a lot of misconceptions about forgiveness. I heard this recently and I thought it was so good. Unforgiveness is like drinking poison but hoping the other person gets sick, when really you'll just be the one who stays sick. That's what unforgiveness is like. I get it. There's a lot of reasons to not forgive. I don't know what you've been through, but surely some of the things are horrific. And you're thinking this, they haven't asked for forgiveness, so I won't. They'll do it again, so I won't. Their offense was so big, I could never forgive. The list goes on and on, reasons why we should not forgive. It's like, hey, I'm just letting them off the hook, and what about justice? And I get all that, and man, we talk about that a lot here. But let me say this, forgiving isn't forgetting. Forgiveness is simply releasing someone from their debt. See, when they offended you, when they betrayed you, they took something from you. Maybe that was your innocence or your relationship or your family or your kids or your purity or your money. They took something from you, and they're not gonna pay it back to you because they can't. So they have this debt. And you can hang on to that and say, you know what, here's the bill, and maybe someday I will get mine and they will pay me back. Listen, they probably won't. Even if they wanted to, they probably can't. So what do? We release them from the debt. I don't expect you to pay me back for that. I will take the pain myself, and I'll pay so that you don't have to. That's forgiveness. And when you release them from the debt, you've forgiven them. And the reason we do this, the only motivation we would have to do this, is because Jesus has done this for us. In Colossians chapter 3, we see an incredible statement about this. Paul says, bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive. To which we would say, Jesus, where would I ever have the strength, the fuel in my heart to do that? Forgive, because the Lord forgave you. That's it. Jesus released me from my debt. Why would I refuse to release someone else from theirs? And when we hang on to unforgiveness, we're denying the power of the gospel, and it leads to self-inflicted re-injury. Every time it comes back up and we think, no, not yet, I'm not gonna forgive, it leads to self-inflicted re-injury. We hurt over and over and over again. So that's step 2. It's not an easy one, but after we heal, we can then identify, what did they take? As valuable as it was, what did they take? I will grieve that loss, but I will release them from the debt, from the expectation that they will ever pay me back. And third, we move into this step. It's the step of ponder. And this is where you think, what do I actually want in this relationship? What would be the best outcome in the relationship? To quote that old outdated song, should I stay or should I go now? You guys remember that one? Should I stay or should I go now? This is where you ponder what you want in the relationship. Now, at this point, you have no idea if you'll get there because you don't know who you're dealing with yet. You know that they're a betrayer and you don't know how they're gonna show up in the situation. So you are just pondering what you would want in the moment. You don't know how they'll show up, but you can show up knowing your desired outcome. This is where we ponder. Step 4 was the step of reconciliation. And this is, after all that other work has been done, where you show up and have a conversation. And this is where you're just kind of on good standing. It doesn't mean things go back to the way they were, or you will be as close as you once were. But this is where you can pass them in the grocery store and anxiety doesn't take over. You can ask them about the kids. You can be cordial. It's just two people saying, you know what, we can be in the same room together. This is reconciliation. And that doesn't require trust, by the way. We're not there yet, okay? We're not there yet. Then we go to the 5th step, which is trust. And this is where we begin to look for those 5 things. The 5 things that we've talked about. Do they understand? Are they for me? Do they have the ability to deliver in a specific situation? Do they have growing character? Next week, we'll talk about their track record. But we're gonna look at all of that to assess whether they are growing in trustworthiness. And we'll start in a small context, in a small area that I might trust them in? Will they be safe and good in that small area? We'll shrink the context to see. And then finally, we get to the sixth step. And that sixth step was evidence. Is there any evidence of a changed life? Now, this is so important to say. At this point in the trust rebuilding process, it's easy to think, I want proof that they'll never do this again. I want proof. It doesn't work this way. We're not looking for proof. But what we're looking for is a path. Not proof, but a path. Are they on a different path in different relationships, in different settings, getting the help they need from perhaps a professional? Are they on a path that makes it likely that their character will be different? A path that makes it likely that they'll grow. We can't control them and we won't have proof. But is there evidence that they're on a path that will produce some change? Is there any accountability? Are they open to questions? Are they showing up at something that will help? Is there a professional involved in the process? We begin to look at all of these things to say, is there a path? Is there new nutrients in the soil of their lives that would make it likely that their character would change? This is where we look for evidence. Now, this is so real. Just a few months ago, I was sitting down with two guys that I love deeply, very close friends of mine, and there was an offense. And we had to work it out. And so I wanted to process this with them. I called them each individually. I said, how hurt are you? How healed are you? Is it your desire to forgive? Can you release from a debt? And could you bring that debt up in the moment in the conversation? What do you really want in the relationship? Well, I want us to be able to be close again. I want us to connect. Okay, I understand that. Well, we're going to have to get in the room and talk through it. And we got in the room, and I was so proud of these two guys. Oh, they were so honest. They got so real with each other. It was a little tense at times, but they shared what was really going on. We began to talk about what would it look like to trust again? What would a new path look like to say you're a new person with new character that can be trusted? And now we're in the waiting game. It's been a few months, but we're looking at the mounting evidence that says this can be a trusted relationship again. Guys, this is real stuff. But this is the process. Now, in this series, each week we've been taking what we've learned and we're applying it to three big categories of life: trust with God, trust with others, and trust with church. So now that we've understood what character looks like, now that we've understood what it kind of looks like to enter into a rebuilding of trust process, let's apply it in these three areas and then we'll wrap up. So trust with God, what does it look like in terms of character? Here it is. Jesus met the demands of reality for you, demonstrating character worth trusting. One story that we've been highlighting throughout this series where we see all five aspects of trust show up in a conversation with Jesus, all five clearly on display, is the story that I hope is in the backdrop of each of our messages, a story that you understand. It's the story of the woman at the well who showed up at the well with so much shame, so much guilt. And Jesus was so good, so safe, so loving and kind. And in the midst of the conversation, he says something about his character that would move her into trusting him. And here's that moment. The woman said, I know that Messiah called Christ is coming. She's saying, this is the character, this is the person I've been looking for and waiting for. That's the one I'll trust, she's basically saying. When he comes, he'll explain everything to us. Then Jesus declared, I, the one speaking to you, I am he. Jesus says, I have the capacity by saying that he is the Messiah to redeem the world, to bring peace to God's people, to rescue from sin, to rule as a good, just, and loving king. Jesus says, I am that. You're looking for the Messiah. That's the character you're waiting for. I have that character. I am the Messiah. And this would be the thing that would cause her to lean in and trust him. Listen, Jesus has met the demands of reality for you. The demands of sin, he's met it, he paid it. The demands of death, he went through it, he beat it. The demands of a perfect world with justice where every tear is wiped away, he has promised to deliver it. If he's met the demands of reality for you, he has a character worth trusting. Okay? Well, what about with others? What does this look like? A person who desires trust and has the capacity to rebuild trust is demonstrating character worth trusting. No one is perfect. This is not about now standing on the moral high ground and saying, well, they're not good enough for me because they don't have aspect 3 of trust, and they're not good enough for me because they haven't done this yet. We're not doing that. But now that we know the process, we can be the people who desire trust. People who know what it is, people who long for it, people who pursue it, people who enter into trust rebuilding processes. Anybody that would be willing to do that is showing a bit of their character that can be trusted. Not fully, but they're on the path of trustworthy character. But what about with church now? How does character fit into trusting a spiritual community like this? Well, a spiritual community who holds leaders accountable to a high standard of character is demonstrating character worth trusting. You guys know this? Maybe you don't know this. I'm accountable to an elder board, right? There's accountability. I don't get to just do what I want, spend what I want, spend, money on the shoes that I want. No, there's accountability for all of our staff. We have staff values and we have a staff handbook, and it's not perfect, but this is the path that we're on. And we have retreats for spiritual health so that we can be vibrant leaders for you all. We have growth plans and discipline plans if we need them, and individual development plans and scholarship plans. We've got a lot of plans. Because through all of that, we want to be accountable leaders. And a spiritual community that holds its leaders accountable to high character is showing to you that they can be trusted. So, as we put all this together, I told you that there was a lead-in to the character qualities that Peter was discussing. Let me share with you the lead-in. It's so important. Here's Peter's lead-up to those qualities. This is 2 Peter chapter 1. 2 Peter chapter 1. In your notes, it might say 1 Peter chapter 2. Those just got flip-flopped. Peter says this: his divine power has given us everything we need for a godly life. Everything we need for a godly life, a life of character. Well, it comes from God. Through our knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and goodness. Through these, he has given us his very great and precious promises. We build our life on his truth, his promises, so that through them you may participate in the divine nature, having escaped the corruption in the world caused by its evil desires. Participate in the divine nature. Let me explain what that means. Peter is saying this: for everybody who walks with Jesus, they will enjoy the character of Jesus. And as they do, their character will grow as well. They will share in the character of Jesus as the character of Jesus grows in them. This is what Peter is saying. Every Jesus follower is growing in character that comes from Jesus. And so what's that like? Well, Peter went on to explain it. So this brings us to our bottom line today. Our bottom line in the message is this: trusting the character of Christ will produce trusted character in you. We trust Jesus and his incredible character. And as we do, Peter says his character grows in us. So there are times in my life, many times in fact, where I think, Eric, where did that come from? Eric, that was so out of character for you. But as we grow in Jesus, there's another way to think of those very same statements. Perhaps this week you would find yourself in a situation where what you do is so out of character with the old you, where you think to yourself, Jesus, without you in me, that would never have come out from me. It's Christ in you, producing the character that's flowing from you. And so maybe this week you'd be in a moment that's maybe tense or stressful, or at least on the inside, you're worried or anxiety is growing, and you respond in a way and you catch yourself. And you go, where did that come from? It's so out of character with the old me. But oh my goodness, it's in character with the new me. Jesus in me. And we'd say this: Jesus, well, that came from you. So perhaps you've been a person throughout most of your life like me who was a control freak, high achiever, control freak type person. And when things weren't going your way, you thought, I'm gonna control my way out of it. And anxiety was growing until you did. But before all that happens, now you just pause and pray. Whoa, Jesus, hold on, let me take this to you first. That's new character. Or perhaps in your life, you would fly off the handle and your words would get you in trouble. But now this week, maybe, you just pause in silence. Let someone else speak before you do. Jesus, that's your character in me. Or maybe you would clam up when things got difficult, but now you're gonna speak up for truth with grace. Jesus, that came from you. Perhaps you've been addicted to some sexual sin, hopelessly addicted to sexual sin, but now there's this discipline, this growing desire to say no. Where did that come from? Jesus, that came from you. Perhaps when you look in the mirror, like, I don't like what I see, insecurity has been growing in me, and you think, but Jesus, you've died for me. The gospel is securing me. Jesus, that came from you. That's my hope for you. that you'd see Jesus in you, growing character. Let's pray for that now. Jesus, I'm grateful for the opportunity to address trust in this way, to discover how trustworthy you are, to discover what it looks like to trust another, to discover that it's possible to trust the spiritual community. Jesus, I pray for everybody in the room that you would, by your grace, give us the gift of noticing something in our life this week that is so out of character with the old us, but in character with the new us, the character that comes from you. Jesus, we give you permission to do that in our lives now. That this week we would see you in us and celebrate it. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Hey, would you stand and we'll sing about that now.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's message and trusting us with your time. If you'd like to connect with one of our pastors or staff, you can easily do that by visiting smccutah.org/connect. When you fill out that quick form, they will get back to you within a few days and be able to connect with you. As well, if you'd like to know more about taking a next step at SMCC, you can easily look at what next steps we have by visiting smccutah.org/next steps. And lastly, if you found today's message both hopeful and helpful, I would encourage you to do maybe one of two things. First, you can share this message with someone that would find it helpful. And you can also choose to partner with us financially so that more people can see messages like this. You can find more information on what that looks like by visiting smccutah.org/give. Again, thank you for joining us today, and I hope to see you at one of our locations soon.